When people hear the term argument, they usually think of people yelling at each other or fighting with each other. Maybe in your mind you envision something that looks a little bit like this. These are my sons with their cousin being silly. But today we're going to talk about what argument means in academia. In academic writing, for there to be an argument, there must be a claim that is backed up with evidence that supports it. Okay, so maybe the first question to ask yourself is, what is a claim? So a claim is a statement or a proposition that claims something to be true. Now, a claim can either be factual or it could be judgmental. Some examples of claims would be that dark chocolate is better than milk chocolate. Obviously true. Another claim could be that wearing masks helps stop the spread of disease. Basically, you get the point that a claim is something that is asserted that needs actual evidence probably to back it up. In academia, when we talk about argument, we think more in terms of entering into a scholarly conversation than in yelling angrily at another person. So rather than look like this, an argument could look more like this. It's a scholarly conversation. It's a conversation where someone presents a claim or an idea and then presents support or research to back it up. Favorite argument of our family is whether it's preferable to vacation on the beach or in the mountains. The beach, definitely, according to me. Of course, I would have to provide reasons and support if I were to really make this argument, which I'm happy to do. Come find me. I have lots of support for that. Either way, to have an argument, you do need to engage with another person. It's not enough to just be there by yourself in an argument. And so how does this work in academia or in writing papers? One of the more famous rhetoricians was an American by the name of Kenneth Burke, and he has a metaphor where he describes what it's like to enter into this academic discourse. He says, imagine that you enter a parlor. You come late. When you arrive, others have long preceded you, and you are engaged in a heated discussion, a discussion too heated for them to pause and tell you exactly what it is about. In fact, the discussion had already begun long before any of them got there, so that no one present is qualified to retrace for you all the steps that had gone before. You listen for a while until you decide that you have caught the tenor of the argument. Then you put in your oar. Someone answers. You answer her. Another comes to your defense. Another supports what you have to say. Another disagrees. The discussion, however, is interminable. The hour grows late, you must depart, and you do depart with the discussion still vigorously in progress. And so when we talk about writing an argument, it requires doing a lot of research so that you can go back and understand the tenor of the argument, what's really going on. And then your job is to respond to those academics who have already started the conversation, with the goal that after you're done submitting your paper and submitting your research, that other people will then in turn respond to you. And this is how we gain knowledge. This is how we become better. And so I encourage you that as you go about this, rather than get upset or worried if someone disagrees with you, to look for those disagreements, because this is how we come to real truth. Okay, so basically that's the metaphor. You go to a party, people are talking, you listen until you know what they're talking about, and then you participate in the conversation and eventually leave. This is basically all that scholarship is. You have different academics who read what other academics have to say, and once they have a general idea of what the conversation is, then they do more studies, they do more research, and they contribute what they've learned to that scholarly conversation. So it's basically all argumentation. They'll present a claim and they'll support their claim with evidence, and then when they leave, other academics are going to come along and respond to them. So let's look at a scholarly article and show you how the metaphor plays out in a practical situation. Here we have an example in academia. The title of this article is Violent Movies and Severe Acts of Violence, Sensationalism versus
science. Basically, the claim of this article, and you're welcome to go back and read it later. In fact, I suggest it. It's a great article. The claim that this article makes is that violent movies don't actually create or lead to severe acts of violence, that is more sensationalism rather than science. Now let's look at how the authors of this article enter into the academic conversation. Look at the very beginning of this article. They start with a couple of quotes. Let's read them together. An estimated 10% to 30% of violence in society can be attributed to the impact of media violence. Wow, that's a lot. And that, as you can see, is a commentary in Pediatrics, which is a medical journal. High exposure to media violence is a major contributing cause of high rate of violence in modern U.S. society. And that is from Craig Anderson, a testimony before the U.S. Senate Commerce Committee on the impact of interactive violence on children. So here we have two very strong claims that suggest that violent media does in fact make people more violent. So from there, the authors of this article go through and they talk about some different sources that talk about how in R-rated movies and in different cases of using guns and different acts of violence, that basically so many people have claimed that these violent movies make people more violent. But eventually they go on to say that's not the case. They do their own study and they show that while that might sound good and where a lot of people have claimed that, that's not true. So notice this structure. They start by quoting other people, by giving us a background about what other people said, and they say that watching violence makes people more violent and makes us have a more violent society. And then as you go down and read the article, as I recommend that you do, they do their own study and they ultimately show that no, that's not what I say. They say that, but they're wrong, and this is why. These are the studies that we did, and actually the truth of the matter is that that's more sensationalism than real science. Real science shows that there just isn't that much of an effect, and so we should be cautious in claiming that it does. So that is how it works.